presentation today that I'm going to give to you is called Feel Good, Feel Better, Do Better. So the purpose of the presentation is to get us thinking about where substance use disorder usually begins. Why do people start using drugs in the first place? Because a lot of times when we talk about addiction, we see the end stages. We see the socially unacceptable behaviors, and we don't see how it began. Why did a person begin in the first place? And a lot of what I'm going to talk about, Kevin actually talked about this morning, so thank you. I don't know where you went. But basically, at the end of the day, no one ever said, I want to grow up and be addicted to drugs, because it's never anyone's intention to become addicted in the first place. So, why do you think people use drugs in the first place? We've talked a little bit about it so far, but does anyone have any insecurities? Absolutely. Anyone else?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Failure.
Some people prescribe drugs if they're sick or hurt.
Yep. Prescriptions. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
Coping mechanism.
Coping skills. Someone in the back over here. Stress relief. Satisfaction. To do better in school. It feels good. To escape reality. Anything else? Genetic impulses. To forget. Curiosity. These are all great answers, and they're all included in this presentation, so thank you. Have you guys gotten drug education within your schools before? Raise your hand if you've gotten some form of drug education within the school. Okay, that's good, because a few years ago, we probably wouldn't have seen as many hands up. So, we like to say, we learned this from a doctor out of Harvard. He says that people use drugs for 3 reasons: to feel good, to feel better, and to do better. So we're going to just explain that a little bit. So feel good, like many of you mentioned, people use drugs because it feels good. And so for my generation, growing up, we got the DARE talk. That was like no longer. Some of you still get DARE. So the message from DARE is, don't do drugs, drugs are bad, just say no. And so we're at the point that we know just say no isn't very realistic. And so if we've been told this message our entire lives, drugs are so bad, don't do them, drugs are going to kill you, drugs are going to put you into this awful state. And then you use drugs experimenting, or you're prescribed, like Gio mentioned, and it feels good, you're kind of confused, and you're like, why did all of these adults always tell me that drugs are so bad when they kind of feel good? And so Kevin really talked about it, is that it's that spiral, and if you have all of these risk factors present, sometimes the drug addiction can take place within your life. So curiosity, sometimes people use drugs or alcohol because they're curious. There's a lot of talk about it, or to get high. In this society, we do a lot of celebrating with drinking and drug use, which can sometimes, again, lead us down the wrong path. And a lot of times we drink and use drugs as a way to bond with people, and sort of, it's very glamorized in our society. When we hear it in music and we hear it on TV, we see it on TV and all of that, it's in every picture online and social media, we start to think, well, if they're doing it, why shouldn't I? And so there's all of these sort of different reasons why people use drugs and alcohol to feel good. And then to feel better. People use drugs sometimes because they don't want to feel. They don't want to feel what's going on inside them, and so that might be some anxiety or depression. So a lot of times people use drugs or alcohol to self-medicate. And there's a lot of trauma that people experience, and so sometimes drugs and alcohol can take that pain away. Stress, problems in the family, feelings of loneliness. A lot of times, which somebody mentioned, it can give you courage and give you confidence that you didn't necessarily have before you took that drink or you took that drug. And sometimes people report that there's really nothing else to do. There's nothing to do in this town. I'm bored, so we just smoke weed all day. there's different sort of examples and reasons. And as someone also mentioned, the prescriptions. So sometimes people are prescribed medications for depression or anxiety, and then sometimes they overuse them, or sometimes people are prescribed these medications and they don't use them, but they have the medication and then they sometimes share it with a friend. So I hear it over and over again right now. The huge issue that I keep hearing about in the high schools are Xans. And those medications are prescribed for anxiety. The proper name is Xanax. And that medication is for anxiety or to help you sleep. And a lot of times people are abusing those medications and sharing with them. The problem is you can become dependent on those prescriptions and you can overdose. And so it's really important to keep that in mind, that some of these medications, although they're prescribed by a doctor, do have a lot of risks associated with them. So sometimes, as someone mentioned, people use drugs mostly probably drugs, to do better. Sometimes people use drugs to do better in school. It's really common for people to misuse Adderall or some of the medications prescribed for ADHD so that they can do better in school. And Kevin sort of talked a little bit about this too, but there's so much pressure on you guys right now. In high school, you're trying to, not only are you trying to do well in school, do good in sports, get ready for college, do well on tests, all the extracurricular activities. There's so much competition going on, so there's so much expectation. All along with social media, which I won't go on the rant like Kevin, but I feel the same way about a lot of the things. But we're comparing ourselves to everybody else's highlight reel. No one's posting pictures about themselves when they're not feeling so well or they're feeling down about themselves. They're always making sure that you appear to be your best in those pictures, and then we constantly compare ourselves to those people. And just overall being a teenager in general, you guys are teenagers that are technically still, you're young adults, but you're expected to act like adults. And so there's all of these sort of expectations going on you. And so sometimes if there's something that can make you feel better and do better, maybe you're gonna try something. And another piece that we were talking about is that we always feel like we're never just right, especially in high school. We're not pretty enough, we're not funny enough, we're not nice enough. Or maybe that person's too loud, or they're too this, or too that, and it's never just right. And part of our message today is that we want you to be able to love yourself and know that you are just right. So this is an example of one of the pictures that someone at Harvard, right? Is someone here that took this picture? So this, we've heard talk about photo boys today. Who's done a photo boys project or is in the works of doing photo boys right now? So we've done quite a few in this area. So this is one picture that sort of answered that last slide. School or stress in general can cause you to drink. Sophomore and junior years are key years for getting into college we want. I feel like there's just so much expected of us to be getting straight A's, honors, and AP classes, then on top of extracurriculars, sports, community service. It's just incredibly stressful. You do as much as you feel you can, but it still might not be enough to get where you want to go. So what is addiction? We want to briefly show you this quick, it's 5 minutes, so I don't know how quick you consider that to be. But it's a really good depiction to describe addiction and help you understand it in a visual way. This was not planned.
All right. Yeah, this time.
curiosity, what is this? Kind of feels good.
It's like half of the screen.
So they get high again, but not as high as they had that first time. And they might have faced some of the consequences. Uh-oh. Now they need it. So now they're at the point where they're trying to use in order to feel normal, and get back to sort of baseline. Addiction, a good definition of addiction is impaired control over a reward-seeking behavior from which harm ensues. We repeat things that we enjoy. We repeat things that cause us to have pleasure. And drugs are just particularly good at doing that. And so no matter the consequences that we continue to face, we continue to seek that drug or alcohol out, because the way I like to describe it is that our brain has been hijacked. And so I know Kevin talked a lot about dopamine in our brain. And so dopamine is a chemical that naturally occurs in your brain. Again, when you feel pleasure, it naturally releases itself. And so when you take drugs or alcohol, it's basically a fake form or synthetic dopamine that's going into your body and telling your body that it doesn't need to continue to produce its own dopamine. So when you no longer have the drug or alcohol, your body just doesn't feel as good as it did before, because it no longer is naturally producing that dopamine, if that makes sense. And so you need to continue to use in order to feel good or in order to feel normal. There's this sort of baseline, and as you go up and then you come down, and when you're in withdrawal, you're sort of under here, and you come back up to sort of get to baseline. And so, again, Kevin sort of talked a little bit about this too, but addiction in the adolescent brain. The teenage brain isn't completely developed just yet, and so when you take drugs or alcohol chronically, it can sometimes lead to the wiring not happening correctly and certain chemicals not properly developing. And so because our impulse control is underdeveloped, but our reward system is overdeveloped as a teenager, you're sort of set up for failure as it relates to drug and alcohol addiction. Because if your brain is telling you to go be social and go have fun and go do all of these, exciting things in your life, but not telling you to consider what consequences might come about, then you're sort of set up for failure. And so the earlier you use any substance, the more at risk you are to later develop a dependence on that substance. And so there are protective factors and risk factors that we like to talk about when it comes to addiction. And so protective factors can keep us safe. Risk factors can increase a person's chance for drug abuse, and then protective factors can reduce that use, that risk. So it's important to keep in mind that one risk factor might not be necessarily the same risk factor for another person. But risk and protective factors can affect children at different stages of their life. So at each stage, risks occur that can be changed through prevention intervention. And so that little graph there is some examples. So early aggressive behavior may be an individual risk factor for a person, but they might be provided by a trusted adult some self-control management skills or things like that to sort of override that early aggressive behavior. And so the list goes on. Lack of parental supervision, substance abuse, drug availability and poverty are all some risk factors. But with some trusted adults and things like that within your life, there are different protective factors that can protect you from that. Some risk factors might be mental illness. So again, we've already talked about that. Anxiety, depression, things like that that run in the family potentially and people use to cope with those symptoms. Early use of drugs, as I mentioned, your social environment, childhood traumas, and then your genes. The genes are the genes are what we're born with, and they can account for about half of what an addiction vulnerability looks like in a person. So a lot of times you guys are the first ones to notice whether a pair is using drugs or alcohol, or might be engaging in some sort of risky behaviors that you're a little bit concerned about. And I know as a friend and as a young person, it's hard to know when am I supposed to intervene? When am I supposed to say something? When do I become a bad friend? When do I become a snitch? When I'm talking about my friend here and the behaviors that they're doing. So we came up with this little resource, which some of you might have seen within your schools. Cassidy, I don't know where she is, but she helped us create this. So we get by with a little help from our friends. If you're worried about a friend, what are some of the warning signs that might be? Have they tried to stop, but they can't stop? Are they getting into trouble? Oftentimes their hygiene will be the first thing to go, and so keeping that in mind, if a person normally has all of their stuff together and then their hygiene starts to go, that sometimes can be an indication that someone's struggling with substance abuse. Using substances to deal with stress. And then what do I say? When you're into that situation, it's really uncomfortable and awkward sometimes, and so this is just a couple of different examples of how you can approach it. Don't accuse, don't argue, don't give up on that person. Tell them that you want to talk to them because you're worried, not because you want to tell them that they're doing something wrong or anything like that. And I know a lot of us don't really like to talk on the phone or go on a website, but if you text hello to this 741-741 number, there's actually trained counselors that respond and individually. It's not just a computerized answer. And you can text hello to that number and they can chat with you about how to sort of handle a certain situation. So we just encourage you to listen, share, support. Sometimes all a person wants is just to be heard and to be listened to. You don't always have to have the right thing to say. It's just sometimes being present for a person can be all that they need. And then the resources that are available. We have the Champion Plan in Brockton. The Castle is one of the 2 state-funded substance abuse treatment centers for adolescents, or age 16 to 20 right now, in Brockton. And the EB Hope Drop-In Center is in East Bridgewater. If you guys need any resources or anything, any services at all. Any questions? Okay, thank you. So Kelly's going to come up now and talk a little bit about what we're going to do next.